Welcome to Buddha at the Gas Pump. My name is Rick Archer, and my guest this week is Martha Creek. And I met Martha a couple of months ago when she came to my town of Fairfield, Iowa, and did a very lovely session on the work by Byron Katie. Martha is a certified facilitator for the work, and most people listening probably will have heard of Byron Katie. And in fact, about 6 months or so ago, I filled out this long, detailed form on Byron Katie's website, asking to do an interview, and they turned me down. But maybe after I've done, you'll kind of like I'll be a stepping stone or something, being able to interview Byron or Katie rather. Martha is also serving unity churches. She's in a ministry serving unity churches, and over the last week or two, I've listened to a number of audios of Martha, both in her capacity as a Byron Katie facilitator and as a Unity Church advisor. And also, I've just started listening to a very nice teleclass she gave on Eckhart Tolle's book, New Heaven and New Earth. And all this stuff is available on Martha's website, which I'll be linking to from my website after this interview, and anyone listening can download it all and listen themselves. So welcome, Martha, and thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you, Rick. I'm blessed to do it, and just delight at what may come to us and through us, and I believe it's a blessing for the world, what you do and what you are, and that's my mission too, to serve humanity. So here we go.
Good. Here we go. So one thing I heard in listening to you talk to various people and do some interviews is that you were born in Bug Tussle, Kentucky. Is that right?
That's right. It's on the border of Tennessee, near just a rock's throw over from Tennessee. It's smack in the middle of the state, and it's where the Beverly Hillbillies came from. So I have a claim to fame, and you are on it.
But you didn't strike oil.
We haven't yet, and I'm really open to that.
I wonder who named the town. They must have seen a couple of bugs tussling. And,
that's the report, and we had T-shirts for a few years when I was kids that showed the tussle bugs, and they're actually dung beetles, and you can figure that out, tussling right along. That's the reports.
Now, tussling means they were fighting with each other, right? The bugs. Or were they just...
could be. This was more like dung beetles, which was rolling dung to do whatever they do with that.
Oh, okay, good. Because when I first heard the name, I thought, well, those beetles weren't loving what is, you know, if they had such a difference of opinion that they had a town named after it.
Just like humanity, we're not loving what is yet, most of us. Yeah.
So, you know, I don't imagine that in Bug Tussle, Kentucky, there was a great wealth of opportunities for spiritual unfoldment, although there must have been local churches and all that you attended as a child. So maybe we could sketch out the course of your spiritual trajectory.
Yeah, you're right about it. There was a lot of churches, actually, churches on every corner, and my family didn't go to church. I was just really called to go to church, and I remember at 3 years old declaring out loud that I'm going to be a minister. And it was very frightening, startling, and shocking to my family because A, women are not ministers, and B, there was no indicator that you would just self-ordain. So it's like there was no way, no path to be seen about how that could actually be accomplished. And I got the neighbors to take me to church. I was that strongly called to go to church and to find that. And I had some radar about people as well, and some distinct memories as a child about not wanting to be in certain churches. And it wasn't anything to do with the teaching, it was more to do with the people that were there. And I had some kind of strange vibes from certain people that I found out later was really right on, that it was one particular man, for example, that was actually molesting his children.
Ooh.
And even as a child, I had some awareness about that. And I
he was the minister of that church or a parishioner?
He was a deacon in the church,
yeah.
So like a lead of the church.
Yeah.
And I just kept looking around. I just asked him to. I got other neighbors that was going to other churches to come and get me. So, and I had a very strong conviction about what was reality, which what I now call God, what was God, what is God, and what is the reality of God. So even though I was hearing certain things, teachings through the church and their beliefs, I was very strongly convicted to my own. And I took the parts that seemed to work for me, and I didn't lose myself in those teachings. I stayed really true to what I believed, even as
This
a
is when
kid.
you're a young child, 5, 6, 7,
Yes,
8, 8 years
yes,
old.
yes, even
That's
as a child.
interesting. Boy, I
Yeah.
didn't have a clue at that age of any of this, and I had to be dragged to church kicking and screaming each Sunday.
Yeah.
Um, and what was your conviction or of what God was at that point, or God
Yeah, that
is?
I believe God is good.
Hmm.
God is good, that we are a spark of that, so that we're inherently good.
Hmm.
And we lose track of that. We lose awareness of that. And then through that lack of awareness, then we do very strange things based
Mm.
on what we're seeking outside of ourselves and actually believing that it's possible to find it outside of ourselves, and that it's the reality is it's who we are, what we are, all of what we are, and that to look inward and to connect and commune with the essence of who we are really works, and to look outside of ourselves and to distract ourselves outside of ourselves leads us down some very interesting paths that are mostly painful and very confusing.
So even as a young child, you had that conviction that God was to be found within.
Yes, and that God was all omnipotent, always present,
Hmm.
and then really enjoyed that as a child. Just the elements, the earth, the wind, the smells, the whatever was here. That I had some kind of notion that it was for me, that it was a gift to me, that the gift of life was precious, and that it was all for me.
And you must not have read that or even been told that by anybody. This was just something that you innately knew. Is that right?
That's how I would say it, or like a divine idea,
Huh.
and that I didn't from a thought like that, I didn't vary from it. I actually believed it and then stayed true to believing that. The first scriptures I read were from the Bible that was given to me by a Sunday school teacher, and she just gave all of her Sunday school children a Bible. And I actually read the Bible a bit, and I was drawn to things, the Psalms and certain parables and stories that seemed to support what I was believing. So
Mm.
I found quickly, at probably about age 10 or 12, I found some what I considered a substantial indicators that what I was believing was true based on how I interpreted what the Bible said.
That's nice. I mean, there are certain, spiritual teachers and authorities who have said that the purpose of Scripture is not to sort of just give you a package of beliefs that you should, just accept blindly, but rather they should be a sort of a confirmation thing to, confirm and supplement what you're actually experiencing.
Yeah, and that was my experience. And it was a very solid teaching for me too. The way that it was presented, the stories that were told, the parables were very meaningful to me. So it was easy for me, fairly easy for me to integrate that. Like this is solid ground here. Like this is the way to live.
Hmm. Was there a fair amount of fire and brimstone being thrown at you at the same time?
There was, and I found it interesting, and I didn't have any effect of that. I don't recall ever being afraid of that. I
Huh.
simply did not believe it.
That's interesting. And you say it's cool that you're, such a young child, you had that level of discrimination that you were able to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff and take what you need and leave the rest.
Yeah, it got interesting too because I was known as being like a fearless child,
Hmm.
that things didn't really frighten me, and even to the point of I I I I didn't believe in death. I
Hmm.
don't believe that death is the end of anything. So
Right.
I had less identification than some. And I remember an example of that is my father was very much afraid of fire,
Hmm.
the thoughts of fire, and then of storms and tornadoes and wind and things. And he would wake us up as a child, our family, and ask us to go to the cellar,
Hmm.
which is an underground place that our fruit was stored, canned fruit and vegetables for the second coming. And I just, when he woke me up one time to go, I just said, I'm not going to go.
Was there a
Um,
storm coming, or was he just like,
yeah,
Huh.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a strong enough no, for lack of a better way of putting it, that he didn't question me.
Hmm.
He didn't try to convince me. And what happened instead is, from that day forward, the family never went in that cellar again.
Interesting. You kind of set the trend.
I did, or it did, yeah.
A lot of times when I hear stories like this, of like your proclivities of, with such a clear conception of what God is and such a strong conviction, and then your father's fear of fire and tornadoes and all, I can't help but think of past lives, with, certain tendencies ingrained in us that we bring into this one.
Yeah, and I'm open to that too. I don't have any explanation for it. And that seems right to me. I don't explore. I've been very open to past lives. I've had several people to offer their insights about past lives I've had and all that, and I find it very interesting, and it even seems right, meaningful to me. And I don't spend much time examining that because this life is a full-time job for me.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, it's sort of an interesting theory, but I wouldn't dwell on it too much myself either. So as you moved into your teenage years, did you get into any of the usual teenage confusion and
I
identity
didn't.
crisis? You just
I
cruised
did
right
not.
through, huh?
I did, and I was just an old soul, considered wise. I recall people, even my high school principal, when there's a story about us having a fire drill in our school, and we went out, we had to evacuate for the drill, and it was almost over. And our next period, our next class period was basketball, and that was
Hmm.
my real love, sports and activities and things. And I just had an idea. Let's go on and get dressed, and get ready for basketball because this is going to be over in a little bit. So when we went back in the building, we didn't report to the class that we had left.
Oh.
We were now ready for the next class.
Hmm.
And the principal came over the intercom and actually said these words: "Would Martha Creek and her little congregation please come to the office?" So that's kind of an indicator of that there was a following of some sort, that there was a calm about me, and something that was attractive to people, that was not afraid, and that was what they would call very positive thinking, even
Hmm.
Pollyanna-ish, and things like that. That was the way I was living my life out.
I'm
And
glad you
I,
said that because I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I recall asking my mother once, I said, "You've never told me what time to be home." I found
Uh,
that so shocking that people were told what time to come home and I
hmm.
wasn't. And she said, I've never had to tell you what time to come home.
Yeah,
Like,
because you just came.
I just went home. Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny that you brought up that story about your little congregation because I was going to ask you whether, having such strong convictions and, really being different than people in many respects, because not many people think that way, made you sort of an oddball who didn't have many friends. But now you're saying it actually
It was the
attracted people to you.
Yes, yes, it was the opposite of that. And I was friends with people that it did make sense to be friends to. So I didn't have gender kind of issues. I didn't have socioeconomic things. I felt as comfortable with somebody that had so-called everything as
Hmm.
someone who didn't have too much. I felt very much a sense of equality
Hmm.
and oneness with people that really didn't make any sense.
Did you find yourself coming to the defense of kids who were being picked on and, that kind of thing that happens in high school?
I did, and in a calmer way though. It was more like a mediator,
Hmm.
and just and there's evidences of that, of actually breaking up scuffles and fights and
Huh.
things, and it was very easy for me. There was never any question about whether to do it. It was just like walking in and going, "Stop this,"
Ah.
and I didn't have any kind of setup in my mind that one was right or one was wrong or somebody caused it. It was just like, stop this here. So it was like what a teacher or somebody trained would have done, and I did it. I just did it as a child. And there's a story about my uncle. We lived and worked on a farm, and we worked in tobacco. And going up this windy road to the tobacco field one day, that my brother driving a tractor, the tractor hit a tree, jarred the wagon. My uncle fell off the wagon under the tractor wheel. The tractor rolled back on top of his body.
Huh.
I jumped off the wagon and held the tractor wheel and kind of took my foot and raked him out from under it. and then turned around, and I was 10 or 12 years old, and I looked around at everybody there and said, you do this, you do that, you go get the car, you help me pick him up, and then we loaded him in the car. I looked at the driver, which was my mother, and said, drive him directly to the hospital.
Uh-huh.
Do not stop for anything. Just get him straight to there. And looking back on that, it's like that would make no sense that you're running like triage for something when you're a kid, so to speak. And I just had a sense of calm and a sense of a clarity of my mind that's not fogged over or kind of whacked out in some kind of crisis situation like that. I was able to have a presence and functioning about me that I have no words to express the gratitude for.
Oh, it's very fortunate. And you're not saying that you had like superhuman strength, like they hear mothers lifting cars off their children, that you stopped the tractor by virtue of that. You're just saying that you just kind of had a lot of presence of mind and were able to sort of orchestrate the.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was not superhuman, just enough that you could actually stop a tractor from rolling just with my strength. I'm a big and strong person.
Yeah, but
So
a 12-year-old girl can't stop a tractor, by.
Well, it's the tractor was stopped. It was just rolling.
Oh, so you
it's not
somehow
like
you're able to apply enough force to keep it from rolling any further.
Yes. So
Okay.
I don't consider it superhuman though. To
Right.
answer your question, it was more like a common sense something. If your mind's clear enough to actually see that and then respond in that way.
So it sounds like you never went through a 60s drug phase like many of us did.
I was born in 1960.
Oh, okay. So you're much too young for this. Well, it's actually the
older.
drugs phase started then and never stopped really. So, but it sounds like you missed it.
Well, and the truth is, I've never taken a drug. I've never had a drug like I've had Advil or something like that. Rarely, and nothing really outside of that.
That's great. I'm saying it's great because this is stuff that I mean, a lot of what you're saying is the antithesis of who I was and what I went through when I was a kid and a teenager and everything else. So it's refreshing to hear somebody who managed to bypass all that.
Well, and it's interesting because it didn't really come to me to do it. And then when I would actually consider it, it was like the answer was just a solid no inside of me.
Yeah.
This is a no. And I rationalized it back then by had a lot of energy and would often, I didn't sleep very much naturally.
Right.
And if there was a substance of some sort that would extend that I felt like I would be highly addictive to something. If I could actually find something where I didn't have to sleep at all, that sleeping was such a drag to me. As there was so much I wanted to do and be, so much life to have. And that was the thought really that stopped me from doing it a lot of times, is that if there was really some power in some drug that would prevent me from sleeping, that I would probably be highly addicted to that. And that seemed like a good enough reason not to do it. It didn't have any real moral or ethical considerations. I never saw it as that. It was really just more practical.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think it all boils down to physiological considerations with those things, and it has very serious diminishing returns. Couple days you might not have slept, and then you'd pay for it.
Yeah, and I feel very blessed about that. That we've all got our things, and what our crazy, confused thinking will take us to. And I feel like that was grace in some way. That just wasn't my thing.
So, at what point did you, start actively pursuing actual spiritual practices of some kind? Because I know you've been through a few.
Yeah, even as a child, I felt like I prayed daily, meditated, I read the Bible. I had a reference for what was how I wanted to live, who I've come here to be. And then as an adult, I started exploring things of transcendental meditations, and I went to mystery schools, and I've done various rituals and practices and things over the years, and still ongoing in that. Loving what is actually a spiritual practice for me. Loving what is and questioning the inquiry of the mind is a meditation, and it's the most significant spiritual practice that I've had, because it absolutely works for me 100% of the time. in 100% of the situations. And in my belief, it will work for 100% of people that really do want to open their mind and really do want to get to the other side if to see what the truth is.
Shall we get into that now, or is there anything of significance in your kind of biological, autobiographical account here that, such as some of these practices and all, that real highlights that are worth mentioning?
Some find it interesting because from that 3-year-old commitment I made when I was 40 years old, I'd had quite a success in the world as far as corporate life and startup businesses and achievement and all that. And I was absolutely committed to end all that when I turned 40, which was in the year 2000. So I started a bigger search for spiritual groundedness and even seminaries. I looked at seminaries and where I'm going to go get official training and credentialing to be a minister when I was 40. So I left what most people would work their whole life to achieve and to have in the way of title and position and money. I left it just a clean break from that at age 40 to go do what I felt like what was my life's calling to do. And I felt like every single thing I'd done in my life, though, was preparing me for what I was going to do when I was 40. And even though I was in a corporate environment, I always felt like I was applying spiritual principles, which I attributed to the success that I had as a result of living it out and from a spiritual realm, that I was approaching everything from that way.
That's great. So you essentially you were able to retire at about 40, and and just begin to dedicate yourself to your true love in life.
It's true, yeah. And then I started studying mediation skills, conflict resolution, and that really came from looking around in these ministries and these organizations, not just churches, but in organizations, and what I saw as a lack of preparedness that people had, particularly ministers and spiritual people in these organizations, that they were not prepared for what was going on in the field, and including myself. I had a naivete about that was shocking to me, that I thought if I could have the success that I'd had in the corporate world, that by the time I got into these deeper spiritual venues and organizations like churches, where we're all such nice people and spiritual people, that it was going to be like just a amazing ease and flow, and it was the opposite of that. So I was really naive and shocked about what apparent woundedness and distress and suffering and insanity that exist even in our churches, and what it was like for leaders to try to navigate that. And so that became my ministry, that I started studying these practices, taking these practices, including conflict resolution, mediation skills, communication skills, and more effective ways of being together, particularly when the heat's turned up and when we're in crisis situations or not getting what we want, to actually be with them with a great deal more presence and functioning than what I've seen people be able to do.
And at what point did you finally meet Byron Katie?
I'd say around 2004.
Okay.
I don't have much of a reference for time or years.
About 7 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, and I actually invited her to come to Louisville, Kentucky, and she was not available to teach, to do a workshop, to lead and facilitate a workshop. And I got a very clear inner message that was, you do whatever you want Byron Katie to do. So I started teaching workshops and seminars straight away without any training whatsoever, other than on the work. And I say training like I mean formal training. I was practiced in the work. It was a spiritual practice for me. I'd read the book several times.
Had you been to see her at this point on some retreats?
I had not. No,
okay.
I'd never seen her until then. And after doing the workshops and seminars myself and facilitating people, like really sitting with people and facilitating them, I eventually went to the school, the 9-day school, and then I've been back 5 or 6 or more times since then, and other weekend intensives and various other ways of working with her to move the work out in the world, and still do that, still will do that.
So you've had quite a potpourri of different practices and things you've looked into and explored. What is it about the work that makes it for you the best thing, or most effective teaching?
It works 100% of the time.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't cost anything. It requires no devices. It requires no person. It doesn't have any dependency on another person. And it is just four simple questions. Even one of the four simple questions actually taken in and answered has the power to clear the mind.
Even the title of her first book, Loving What Is, if all you read was that title, you can get quite a bit of benefit out of it, I think, if you understand what she means by it.
Well, I think that's right, Rick, and I think there's also, and even for me, there's some appall at the title also. Like loving what is too hard, Martha.
Right.
Loving what is too hard. You're asking too much of me, and I'm not asking anything of anybody. And do I love what is? It's like seldom, rarely, often I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm closer to loving what is than I've ever been in my life. So I think it's a direction that I'm headed in. And I think it's lofty to think that we go from living from these eons old ways of being um, and the suffering we've seen since recorded history to loving what is. And it's for me, it's not a spontaneous arrival somewhere, but it's absolutely a direction that I'm moving in. And
Mm-hmm.
the more I practice and the more I question what I'm thinking, then the more I love what is, and at least I'm neutral to what is.
Yeah. I think people, when they first hear that title or that phrase, might think, oh, well, does that mean you love rape? You love Auschwitz? You love malaria? I mean, there's all kinds of horrible things in this world that why would anyone want to love them? They should be opposed, they should be fought, they should be changed, they should be cured. If Roosevelt and Churchill had just said, oh, we sort of love what Hitler was doing, we'll just kind of let him do his thing, the world would have been a very different place today. So perhaps you could respond to that objection. I'm sure it's not a very informed one if one really understands what the work is all about, but it's an objection which I'm sure you've heard before.
It is routine, and so it's a question not of me of whether I love it or not. It
Mm-hmm.
simply is what is. So I don't love rape or war yet, and I understand that it's what is, and
Mm-hmm.
opposing it creates more of it. It perpetuates itself. So to the degree that I hate war, then I make war on warmongers. I make war on people that do war and that will not end the war in the world to do that. Doesn't mean that if you are about to shoot somebody and I can actually stop you shooting somebody, I absolutely would. And not because it's right or wrong, because I'd hate to see you do that to yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
shooting someone, would hate to have to live with that myself. I'd hate to be the killer. So then I believe that that would be hard on you too. So if I can stop it, I will. And it's not, I don't run the world yet. So I can't do what I cannot do. And I've learned from working with people that have been raped. Just this week, actually, just a few nights ago, a lady said that she was raped and abused. And when I asked a simple question like, I was raped and abused, speaking for her, what does that mean? You were raped and abused, and that means that. And she said, I'm worthless.
Mm-hmm.
I'm worthless. There's something wrong with me. And then the tears start because even after the pain of the rape and the abuse are over, 40 years of that, the pain has not, is all over. And the deep pain, the pain that's what's really running our show, is caused by a thought that we've not questioned, like I'm worthless or there's something wrong with me. I don't deserve love.
And she's piling an interpretation on top of something which it doesn't need to be there.
Ever. And that's really the pain and suffering. So even a concept from what you just shared with horrible things happen in the world, it's like
Mm-hmm.
we've made that up. We've looked at everything we don't agree with and said it's horrible. When we don't get our way, we say that's horrible. Now, that's us calling it that. So when we give it a meaning that is horrible, then we get the experience of horrible. And until we question that, what good has come out of it, what good, if the universe is friendly, if God is good, then what good has come from those horrible things?
Mm-hmm.
And then it sends the mind in a different direction that does not deny that that was horrible or that we wouldn't have preferred that. We certainly wouldn't want that in anybody's life. And the reality is it's here. It occurs. And it's been happening since recorded history. And we're still telling ourselves things like it shouldn't happen.
Mm.
It shouldn't have happened. And to the degree that we oppose reality, we lose. Reality rules, like it or not, and we're then disabled, paralyzed, mortified, afraid, panicked, terrorized, shut down, powerless, pitiful, victimized, fill in the blank, as a result of believing a concept like that.
But I presume this doesn't disempower a person. If you were a doctor, for instance, it would not mean that it would not eliminate your motivation to, say, go to Africa and help people who are suffering from AIDS or malaria or something. You might throw yourself totally into that, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. That's
yeah,
exactly it, Rick. It's the opposite of disempowerment. It's like your mind is clear. You've got all the energy that we have spent arguing with what is. 100% of that energy can be put toward doing something about what we can do something about. And if it's people that are hungry, feed them. If it's people that are distressed, give them a blanket, apply medicine to them. So we're then freed up to be love in action, actually.
yeah. And a few minutes ago, you said, with regard to war, the solution wouldn't be to fight it because that stops more wars. But wouldn't you acknowledge, like, take my World War II example, the Allies basically had to step up and oppose Hitler militarily because otherwise he was just going to keep running rampant all over
Well,
Europe.
absolutely, and that's an insane thinking that would cause something like that. So you're not dealing with somebody or something in its right mind. So when it's somebody's not coming from their right mind, then we've got to have a boundary of some sort and to say you've got to stop that, and regardless of what it takes to say that must be stopped.
Yeah, there's a saying in India: it takes a thorn to remove a thorn. you know, and
Yes,
sometimes you need a thorn.
exactly, and which means that's part of our role here too. That we're gonna it's not one or the other. It's not, is it going to be just that or just that? It's going to be both. And I think that's going to free up some of our suffering, is to understand that it's not one or the other in these situations. That is there war? Yes. And is there a possibility of no war? Yes. And instead of making it good and bad, it just is what is. And
Yeah,
that in itself is a little less suffering. It just is. It's just not, it's not good or bad. And the mind has to draw the line and say this is good, this is bad, and then it has to be right. So it gathers evidence to support itself, and then we're further and further into believing it instead of questioning it. Like, what if we didn't have a concept, if something's good or bad? And
hmm
an example in my own life is I got a diagnosis of cancer a
hmm
few years ago, and I absolutely did not mind. When I got the call that I had cancer, I didn't have a reference for it was bad. It just
hmm
is. And I had less identification than even I knew, that I didn't believe that it was my breast, so to speak. When I would hear them say, it's your breast, it's like I didn't have a reference for that. Like, it's not my breast. Like, not out of a denial or something, but it's like the body is a temporary something or other here. And when as the body changes, I don't look like I did when I was 1 year old. I don't look like I did just 2 years ago. So the body's having its own life. It's doing what it's come here to do, and
hmm
it's not to do with who I am. I don't pick what happens, and then there's no war in that. And then I can just follow the directions. It's like, here's a cancer in your breast, and here's what you do about that. And if it feels right and made sense to me, that's what I follow.
Yeah, it's like if your car's transmission blows out, it's not you that's blowing out; it's your vehicle that's damaged.
Exactly.
Get the vehicle fixed.
Yes, that's another perfect example of that too, Rick. When you hear the word my,
hmm
like, if we hear somebody else's car got scratched, this is from Eckhart Tolle's work.
hmm
If you hear somebody else's car got scratched, it's like, oh, that's too bad. Then it's like, my car got scratched. And it's like, oh, wait a damn minute here. Now, that's a different story. My car, my body. So we have a big reaction when we think it's my body.
You were saying that things are not so much good or bad; they just are what they are. and you love them as they are. But how does that relate to the idea of having preferences? Like if you go into a restaurant or something, there's one food, perhaps that you're going to enjoy, or even forget restaurants. I mean, at home, there's certain things you like, you cook those for yourself, and there's certain things your dog likes, you wouldn't eat those. We do as human beings have preferences.
Yeah, it's right. So a couple of things I want to clear up is that this notion that I uh, don't see things as good or bad is not really true. I'm not there yet,
Hmm.
Rick. So I still will have an experience of not liking something, and I'm quicker now to catch my mind calling something bad, and I don't believe it much anymore. So even if
Hmm.
the mind says that's bad, I'm quicker to catch that. So with enough practice, I'm less likely to kind of go down that path. So I'm not there yet. It's a direction I'm headed in, and I have got a real much more solid foundation of, in your case of food, like I can think I'm going to prepare a food, for example, that I've liked, I may have liked most of my life, and I can prepare it believing that it's going to turn out a certain way, and actually taste it or put it in my mouth, and it wasn't what I had in mind.
Hmm.
For whatever reason, I may not like it. And if I'm attached to liking it, or if I'm believing that it's what I've got to eat, or it's what I'm supposed to eat, and I'm not really liking it, then there's a big internal war there,
Hmm.
versus just accepting what is. And that for whatever reason, what I used to like, I don't like anymore. And that's been my case, that certain things I ate for a lot of years have left me, that I don't prefer them anymore. And that if I think I know how something's going to turn out, I'm absolutely insane. There's
Hmm.
no way to know a future that doesn't exist. So I can say I can cook this egg the same way I've cooked it always, and I cannot know how it's going to turn out. And if I'm attached to how it's going to turn out, then I just won't have much peace, because then when it doesn't turn out the way I like or prefer, then I have a little tantrum.
Yeah,
And
and if you burned it, you could always cook another one.
yes, well, if there is another one. So
Right.
then the mind has a lot of conditions put on things. There has to
Hmm.
be a certain kind of egg or certain size egg, and it's got to turn out a certain way, and it's got itself set up quite substantially to always get what it wants. And then when it doesn't, and that's the bottom line to it, really, I think, Rick. What happens in us when we don't get what we want, regardless
Hmm.
of what it is? And if we think that something's right or wrong, or we should have gotten A and we got B, where does it leave us?
Hmm.
And it's not much of a life for me to think that I know how things ought to be, because it leaves me too much gap in my peace. And I'm more interested in having peace regardless of how things turn out.
Yeah. There's a couple lines from the Gita come to mind. One is, you have control over action alone, never over its fruits. That's one. And another is, satisfied with whatever comes unasked, beyond the pairs of opposites. So it's like, you have control over this moment, or you appear to anyway, but not over the outcome, and so whatever outcome comes, you didn't have control over that. So you're satisfied with whatever comes unasked, beyond the pairs of opposites.
Exactly. And to the degree that I can live that out, that is my interest, and that's very, very exciting to me,
Hmm.
um, to experience that and to actually believe that that it's possible. And when I don't do it, I return as quickly as I can.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us into the work itself, the 4 questions and the turnaround and all that, because that's a tool that you've found very valuable for inculcating this way of behavior, this way of being.
I'd love to go right into that, and you told me offline a description of humility that I'd love to hear again, if you're
Oh,
willing to.
that's right. We just had a little glitch, Martha and I, where I forgot to resume the pause button after we had some little interruption, and the line was that it was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi actually who defined it this way in his commentary on the Gita. He said, humility is the quality of not insisting that things happen any particular way. I mean, often the word humility is used to connote sort of a self-deprecation, oh, I'm just a miserable slug, and I'm nothing. But what he was saying is it's more of a, again, not insisting that things happen any particular way, not sort of superimposing your ego on the flow of events, and trying to sort of, I've heard you say many times, not trying to do God's job.
You got it. And that's what it led me, that my definition of humility had come somewhere along the way of just continuing to loosen and loosen and loosen my opinions. And it doesn't mean that I don't have one. I'm just less and less invested in them and less attached to them, so that I can say, are you going to vote A or B? And it's like, I vote A. And I don't think that it means anything. It was...
Yeah. Or at least it doesn't mean that all the people who vote B are a bunch of idiots, I mean,
ever. Exactly. Or wrong, which is right. Idiots equals wrong, which is how the mind's drawn the line. Like, which is usually, it's not usually, I'm right, you're wrong. My way is the better way. My way is the right way. Or if the coin turns up, like, I am a miserable worm of the earth. Or
well, there are a lot of wars have been fought in which people on both sides felt that God was on their side,
Of course.
And so, I would say either you're going to say God's on no sides or God's on all sides, but it's not going to be one side or the other.
That's what I believe too. That God is there. Yeah. Something created us. Something is breathing us. Something is in charge here.
Yeah, and He's breathing the tiger as well as the gazelle, and the murderer as well as the victim, and I mean everything is being animated by that same divine force.
Absolutely. What else could be possible?
Yeah. So maybe we could. Have you ever been married?
I was married to the only person I dated. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's nice. But that again is like symptomatic of your your certainty and conviction in life at a young age.
Well, it's actually the opposite of that. There's been about twice in my life, and I'm really glad you went into this, Rick, because there's a couple times in my life where I left myself.
What does that mean? You got blurred over?
I got blurred over. I left myself. I left my conviction. And one of it was when I got married. I got married when I was 18 years old, and I never wanted to. I did not believe to do that. And I got blurred over, and I left myself. I lost myself in some kind of standard or norm, or just a state of confusion, I would call it, and actually got married. And I stayed married for 5 years, so I was with somebody for about 8 years total, as a kid, as an 18-year-old. And I've not been married since that time. And
did you have any children?
I didn't, and that was another conviction that I had as a child, that I would not have children. So I didn't waver from that, even under a great deal of pressure from a lot of peers, family, and a husband, actually, to have children, and it was an absolute no for me.
And marriage too had been a no. It wasn't that you married the wrong guy; it's that you hadn't wanted to get married. Period. Right?
I didn't want to get married. Period. Yeah. I didn't want to get married, period. And then, and that's an example of this belief system, because even though I didn't want to do that and did, I would not end it based on a belief that was very simply, if you make your bed, you've got to lay in it. Now, that's been generations old and handed down, so divorce is wrong, and you kind of did this, so you're stuck with it. And that was an example of how one belief that you don't question will absolutely paralyze you from doing what you know is the kindest, most intelligent, caring thing you can do for yourself and for another person. That I absolutely was able to get a divorce from that man because I believed that it was unkind to him not to do it.
Right.
That I believe for me, I could have stuck it out and just lived like that. And what kept me from doing it was it was not kind to him to be in a marriage with someone who did not want to be married.
Did you see it as a possible course of events that you would stay married, and that difficult as it was, the difficulty in itself would be evolutionary for you? Or was it just so incompatible that would have not been a viable
It wasn't.
possibility?
It was viable. It was viable, and it was it just felt dishonest. I
Yeah.
don't know the word for it actually, but it was not it was a dishonest thing to do would be to
Hmm.
stay married. It was not integral,
Right.
and therefore the war in me was too much.
Yeah. Did your husband end up remarrying, and is he a happier
Yes.
man now?
Uh-huh.
Good.
I
So,
don't know what his life is like in his
yeah.
heart and his mind.
Right.
I have a strong belief that it's better than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah. Good. All right. Um, so, 2004 or so, you met Byron Katie. You started actually, teaching the work or facilitating little workshops with it before you had even trained with her or even met her, just on the basis of reading the book and all. But at a certain point, you went deeper and got more formal training. So I have a kind of a sense of how the work works because I've read her books and everything, but a lot of people listening might not know anything about it, and we keep referring to it, so maybe we better talk about that a little bit, and so people know what we're talking about.
I'm delighted to. I
Okay.
want the work out in the world, so any way it can move, I like that.
Yeah. So why don't you lay it out for us, the basic points of it? There actually are some pithy little points that summarize it, and that'll give people a sense of what it is.
Well, it's a very simple technique of 4 questions to question your mind.
Hmm.
So any thought that you have, any thought that becomes a belief that you have that causes you stress, you can write down that thought or ask these questions to yourself or be facilitated in these questions to see if what you're believing is true. And an example is if I have a thought that somebody is unkind to me, I ask me is can I absolutely know that that's true,
Hmm.
that they're unkind to me? And then, well, yes, could be the
But
answer.
but the word absolutely is pivotal there.
It is to some of us, not always, Rick, but it could be.
Uh-huh.
That's a sign that you've actually questioned your mind a bit, that
Yeah.
it would be pivotal in you. That's not always the case.
Huh.
So the answers to questions, the first question is actually, is it true? And then the answer is yes or no. And there's no other answer to questions 1 or 2, yes or no. And the mind will want to go off and go, yeah, but, and oh, but if you only knew. And it's like, that's not the work. The work is simply, here's the question, and then it's either yes or no.
I'd have a hard
Question,
time answering yes or no at that point because I would say, well, yeah, but not entirely. I mean, I can see to some extent that it's not true. So how can I answer yes or no?
yes,
And that
well,
leads to the second question.
well, it does, and it will also as a demonstration to yourself of the wiliness and the slyness even of the mind, the conditioning of the mind to not just land on an answer, even when you hear, Rick, the answer is yes or no, that we absolutely cannot just say yes or no. It's very difficult to just land on yes or no, as simple as it sounds, because the mind's got to be right. So it's got to go out and rationalize it, justify it, explain it, and that's really the internal war. Is all that mental gyration. It's not what's happening. It's all the mental gyration that goes with it. So it's question one is it true? She's unkind to you. Question 2 is, can you absolutely know that to be true, that she's unkind to you? Question 3 is, how do you react when you think the thought she's unkind to you? And then the answer is whatever the answer is. It's often things like, well, avoid her, I gossip about her, I teach her a lesson, I give her the look, I may cut off from her. Um, so it's like, wow, that's how I react when I think and believe somebody's unkind to me. So the short answer is, when I think and believe somebody's unkind to me, then I'm unkind to them. So it's not hard to see with much of a look that I'm doing exactly what it is I don't want somebody else to do to me or out in the world. Question 4 then is, who would you be if you didn't have the thought she's unkind to you? Who would you be without the thought she's unkind? And people have their own experience of it. It could be more focused, freer,
Mm-hmm.
calmer, saner, more balanced. And the work, I think, some people that haven't taken the work as deeply as possible would give off an answer like peaceful, calm, kinder. And it's one thing to answer the question like that, and it's an entirely different thing to actually experience your answer.
Mm.
So to say that you're calm or calmer is one thing. To actually experience calm and calmer is a different matter. And I think that's where we fall short with the work, and the power of the work is not to actually ask the question, answer the question, and experience the answer. And I think that's another level to the work, a
Seems like to
deepening.
experience the answer, your perspective would have had to have shifted quite a bit by that time in order for you to really, arrive
Yes.
at that. Yeah.
Yes. So it's less made up and more experienced. And then there's a great power in that from my experience.
Right. And people's
And
perspectives don't always just turn on a dime. Sometimes there's a lot of conditioning. It takes a while to unravel it.
very seldom turn on a dime. Yeah.
Right.
Even if we've got a sense of it, because the mind is infinite, it's very quick. So it'll come in even if you're saying calm and going, well, yeah, but she better not do that or she better not do that. And if she does that one more time, and there was that one time, and so it's very quick to fight back, even when you're questioning and getting a sense of what it would be like. Heaven, how do I react when I think she's unkind? Hell, who would I be without the thought heaven? And we'll still go back to hell over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And then it's powerful to see that as I question, she's unkind to me. With the thought that she's unkind to me, I suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Without the thought, I don't. Now, that's very clear that she's not my problem. Now, this freed me the day that I really got that people are not my problem, that if there's a problem here, it's thinking. So my thinking is what was causing all of that, not somebody, not some person. And then that applies across the board. When people stop being the matter with us, so who's the matter with me? And how much we've lived that out over our whole life. Who's my problem? And when who's my problem doesn't exist anymore, then you got a direct shot to working with your thinking, which is the cause of all the suffering. And Eckhart Tolle's words are along the lines of the work is like a razor sharp sword that cuts right through the illusion that there's anything problematic here but the thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So then we have a thought, we write it down, we ask these four questions, and then we turn it around. And when I have a thought, she's unkind to me, one of the turnarounds is I'm unkind to her. And I've already seen that from question 3. How do I react when I think she's unkind to me? I see that I do that also. Another turnaround is I'm unkind to myself. So if I want unkindness to stop in the world, then I've got to stop it right here where it started, which is in my own experience, in my own mind, and in the way I treat me and others. So to the degree that I'm unkind to me, then I'm also going to be unkind out into the world. I also often turn it around with what's the opposite of unkind is kind. Now, this takes a radically open mind, or a willingness for your mind to open to look at how is the same person that we've told ourselves, sometimes our whole life we've told ourselves she's unkind, that we start to open the mind up a little to see, is it possible that she's also kind?
Mm-hmm.
Where's one example in our life that she actually was kind to me? And then we can start to find one little way that she was kind, and then you can find 2 ways and 3 ways and 4 ways, and to the degree that we send our mind in that direction, then it actually has a new balance to it, a recalibration, if you will.
Mm.
So we're not as far off, we're not as insane, we're not as far off the center.
It's not a black and white universe, is it?
Not that I know of.
I mean, there's always, there's always gradations and spectrums and shades of gray and good
Yes.
mixed in with the bad and vice versa.
Well, and that's wholeness in itself. Like
Yeah.
if we didn't have the line drawn down the middle and saying this is good and this is bad, or this is right and this is wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
we understand it's not one or the other, It is
Right.
one and the other. This is key. And then to the degree that we get that it's one and the other, what would we react to?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples of where people try to make everything black and white. I mean, Democrats are good, Republicans are bad, abortion is bad, or abortion is good, or I mean, there's so many issues that occupy so much of our news in this day and age that are just people shouting from polarized perspectives, whereas it's really a much more of a you know integrated mosaic of all kinds of qualities, and it's so hard to categorize anything in absolute terms.
Yes, and to any degree that we do, it's all made up.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we've lost touch with the fact that we made it up. And then we're reacting to what we imagined, and the meaning that we've given something, we're reacting to that meaning, not what is.
Yeah, yeah. So I kind of interrupted you, I guess, because there's more than just those four questions. There's the have we done the turnaround yet? Did you mention
Uh-huh.
that?
The turnaround, the turnarounds were she's unkind to me, turns around to she's kind to me,
Hmm.
turns around to she's not unkind to me, and then you find examples for how that's also true. Another turnaround is I'm unkind to myself.
Hmm.
So I get to wake up then to the fact that we're the same, you know, and to any degree that unkindness exists in me, then naturally I'm going to see it out in the world because I have projected it there.
Yeah.
That anything that is unresolved in my own mind is projected out into the apparent external so that I get to see it.
I remember when I listened to Loving What Is on as an audiobook, there was one thing which I couldn't quite digest, which was that there was some woman who had been sexually abused as a child or a very young girl by her father or her uncle or somebody, and Byron Cater took her through the questions and then tried to turn it around to say I abused him, or and correct me if I'm not remembering this right, but I couldn't understand how an innocent child could in any way have been the culprit there to any extent.
Yeah, well, and that's the exact point in that book where a lot of people reportedly to me have report that's where they abandon the work, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
And I'd love you to listen to that again, Rick. I love to listen to that over and over again. So I
Hmm.
believe um, I want you to experience what I experience naturally. So I want that for you. Um, and what happens in that dialogue is Katie asks her, what was your part? So we're
Hmm.
just looking at turnarounds. We don't know what they are. So the
Right.
opposite is I abused him.
Hmm.
And then Katie's question to her is, what was your part? To a little 9-year-old girl, what was your part? And she eventually said, after that happened, I could get anything I wanted from him. So now he
Was she
did this.
blackmailing him?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
like I'm
She
gonna
well,
tell if you don't give me
well,
something.
I didn't get it like it that it was like that, Rick. It was more like that was our way, our only way to get love, approval, and appreciation. That was our only way to get the love that we were seeking, and we would do it at any price. So even a little 9-year-old girl would sacrifice that kind of pain to get the love that she was seeking. So her part was she did that seeking something from him, and then after it happened, she could get whatever she wanted from him. But so then it became strategy, a tool.
So the implication was that she was a willing participant in order to get what she wanted.
At some level. Now, it also didn't miss that he could have done, I don't know if you can see my hands, but like he could have done this much, like a
Uh-huh.
thousandfold. He did
Hmm.
that much harm,
Right.
and she did this much.
Right.
100% of her pain
Hmm.
was in the part that she had.
Yeah.
So did he do a thousandfold over? Yes. She did one teeny little part of it, and that's where 100% of her pain is,
Hmm.
because she had not that was not okay with her to do that.
So would you say that there really could not be any circumstance in which the victim is totally innocent, that we're always culpable to some extent?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that what I believe is whatever action and reaction we have is thought based.
Hmm.
So it's not even so much for me, Rick, what happens. It's like, what was I thinking that caused that? And then I get to work at the level of the cause. And when I question what thought caused it, then I can see what hurts and what doesn't. And then I'm enlightened to that. And then I can stop hurting me and I can stop hurting you to the same degree.
So in other words, it's kind of, I'm just pursuing this a bit so I totally understand what you're saying. So you're saying it's kind of fruitless to try to analyze the occurrence that may have happened 40 years ago and determine what the percentages of blame and whatnot may be, because you really have no control over something that happened 40 years ago. What happened happened, but what you do have control over is how you're living with that now, how you're reacting to the impression of that now. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and that's the one thing we can control is our internal world. So I'm still reacting to what happened 40 years ago, just like it's happening again today, and it's over.
Yeah.
Now, and I can say it shouldn't have happened, shouldn't have happened, shouldn't have happened, and I lose. To every time I tell myself and believe it that it shouldn't have happened, and it did happen, I'm stressed.
Right.
So the rape is over. In this case, a rape is over, and I'm still raping me over and over and over every time I play it through my mind. And the
Yeah.
mind's got the picture made up in graphic detail, showing it to us, and we're reacting to what the mind is projecting instead of to what's in front of us, which is in this moment now. There's no problem here, woman on chair.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's good that we're dwelling on this because, without, if you read things like that, it can seem a little heartless or cold or something, to, say that the girl had some kind of responsibility for the circumstance. But, I mean, if, well, you just said it very beautifully. If we can somehow, well, woman sitting on chair, if we can somehow just be in the present and not relive 1,000 times things that have happened throughout our lives, then we're free, right?
We are exactly, and it doesn't change what happened.
Right.
And no amount of praying, wishing, wailing is going to change what's over.
Did you ever hear that Zen story about the two monks, an older one and a younger one, walking along, and they get to a stream, and there's a beautiful young girl that is waiting by the side of the stream, and she wants to cross. It's a muddy thing or something, and she can't get across. And so the older monk picks her up, and they walk across the stream, and he puts her down, and they keep on walking. And a couple hours later, the young monk finally can't handle it anymore. Says, "What did you do? We're not supposed to touch women, and yet you picked up that beautiful young girl." And the older monk says, "Oh, are you still carrying her? I put her down on the other side of the stream."
That's exactly it. And I love that. I'm glad you told it again. I love hearing you tell it. And that's from where I read that was from A New Earth, Eckhart Tolle's work that
Oh,
I
he
love
told
so
it too.
much.
Yeah, that's an old story.
It's written in that book. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing, Rick, whatever it is, even a minute ago. If it's like if you took on shame, for example, for not hitting the pause button.
Yeah,
It's like,
what's Martha going to think of me? I wasted
yes.
10 minutes of her time.
Yeah, like that's possible, honey. Like that's
Yeah.
not possible for you to do it. And the reality is the thought did not come to you. Press the pause button. That's all that happened.
Yeah.
And you cannot have a thought that you don't have. There's no amount of efforting, wishing, strategizing that's going to make a thought appear to you that doesn't appear to you. And instead of just staying in that reality, we take it on like we're inept or incompetent or we got shame and guilt about it. And then we worry what's somebody going to think about us versus just seeing our own innocence in that. And the fact is that a thought didn't come to you to push the pause button.
Yeah, I did a whole interview with this lovely lady named Betty Ensign, and we went on for 2 hours. And then when I went to process the video, I discovered that there was no audio. The mic hadn't worked. So I thought, darn it was such a good interview, we're going to do it again. So I set it all up again the next night, and we did another 2-hour interview, and I went to process it, and the audio worked fine for 20 minutes, and then it stopped working. So we lost that one too. I'm going to do it again, actually, because she had such a good story. But I must admit, I felt a little bummed but I kind of was like the duck in Eckhart Tolle's story. I shook my wings a bit and thought, okay,
Yes.
move on, whatever. Maybe there's a reason why the first two ones didn't work.
Yeah, we'll drop the maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
there's the reason, whether we ever understand it or not. And we can spend the rest of our life assessing it, evaluating it, talking about it, or being bummed about it, or we can just notice it's what is and then go on about our life.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't going to bring back the interview for me to beat myself up over it.
Well, that's really wise. Yeah.
Yeah. We mentioned Eckhart Tolle a few times. Does he? I've heard actually that he, on some occasions, actually prescribes Byron Katie's work as a sort of a way of doing arriving at a technique for arriving at the state that he so eloquently, describes. This
Yes, and
being in the present. And I'm sorry. Go
that's
ahead.
my interpretation too. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Rick. That's my interpretation too, and that's how I've heard it said is that what Eckhart Tolle is what to do, and Byron Katie is how to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's the how to do it, and we've read for centuries what to do,
Hmm.
and now it's time to do the work, and there's a reason it's called the work, I think.
Yeah, that's good because I mean a lot of teachers, even contemporary ones, are very good at describing the state they're in, but they're kind of offering that description as a way to be in that state. But unless you're in that state, it doesn't work. I mean, you can't just sort of. It's like a man on a mountaintop describing the view. It doesn't help the people who are way down the mountain someplace. You need
Precisely, and
you
my
need
short
climbing
answer for
techniques.
my short answer for that is it's just more blah blah blah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
and which is what I say in workshops, that don't try to believe what I'm saying because it's just my blah 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 until you take this on and experience it yourself. Then you've got another theory to talk about instead
yeah,
of like really taking this in and seeing what happens, what shifts in you when you really question what you're thinking.
yeah. Now, Eckhart Tolle is he's kind of a mystic in a way, in the sense that he's not just describing a philosophy; he's having an experience, and he's speaking from his experience. He's, in a certain level of awareness or awakeness or whatever. And I get the same thing with Byron Katie reading her books, especially that one, A Thousand Names for Joy, in which she used the Tao Te Ching to kind of comment on her own experience, and elaborate it. And it's a very beautiful book. In fact, to me, it was the most readable of her books.
Hmm.
But what we are talking about here is not just sort of not merely a way of learning to deal more smoothly with mundane issues and concerns. We're talking really about enlightenment, as far as I can tell, ultimately. And but we're talking about a teaching from a woman who spontaneously became enlightened or became awakened. So I guess what I'm leading to is, to what extent has that become a reality for you? Let me ask that one first.
Well, there's nothing been spontaneous for me. I can
Hmm.
tell you that, and that's also not my understanding of what happened with Katie. It's described as she had an experience of where she saw that there's no her and that something was seeing through her eyes, and that when she believed her thoughts she suffered, and when she didn't. And then she worked diligently on that for years after that, sitting alone
Uh,
and asking these questions. So she had quite a trek from the way I understand it, including how this work was formulated and what it was like to lose orientation and identification, to where people
mm,
that show up and say, I'm your family, and you don't have a reference for what family is or who these
yeah,
people are, and you just go with them because you don't know, you don't see a reason why not to go with them. um, so mine has been a practice. Mine has been a systematic writing down and questioning my own mind and thought, and then facilitating other people to do that. And while I facilitate other people to do that, I'm also doing my work when I do that. And
hmm,
I feel like that I've had a lot of grace in that, that there's things that I never worked on, so to speak, people I never worked on that stopped bothering me. Things
mm,
stopped bothering me. I stopped being affected by things that I've been affected by my whole life as a result of me doing this work. And that's what I would describe then as a very high level exponential effect of this, that it's not a 51%, 52%, 53%. It was a 51% and then a 61% and then an 85%. And the more I do it, the better it gets. And the more my mind clears, the more energy I have, and the more sanity I have, and then the more joy I have. So to talk about living a life of joy is one thing, and to actually live a life of joy is something else.
Well, you
And
seem to have a lot of energy. You basically live out of a suitcase, as far as I can tell.
yeah,
Just
it's
traveling all
true.
over.
It's true. It's
Yeah.
true. And it makes no sense. Rationally, it makes no sense how I physically can do what I do.
Hmm. Well, but you love what you're doing, and I think when people love what they're doing, they have abundant energy.
I think you're right about it,
Yeah.
and that's my experience here too. And I'm more excited. I remember hearing Katie say a few years ago that eventually, you may go a day and not have much of a problem. You go a week, you haven't had much of a problem. You go a month, and then eventually you go years without a problem, and then eventually you can't even find a problem.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, oh, horse patootie. Oh, give me a break.
Yeah.
You got to be kidding me. And I can tell you now, this a few years later, that I have a glimpse of what that means. That
Sure.
I have a glimpse of not experiencing things as problems that I never would have believed that would be possible.
Well, it's probably more than a glimpse. I mean, when's the last time you really felt like you had a problem?
Um, I have slight offs. Yesterday, I had an actual concern about what somebody would think of me,
Hmm.
and that felt very strange.
Yeah.
And I was very excited about it. I can tell you that because I knew that there's something there for me.
Mm.
So years ago, it would have been bummed. I'd been bummed like, oh, brother, something bothers me. And now it's more like, wow, what is that?
It's like an
What did I
opportunity.
think? Like an opportunity,
Yeah.
literally that. And it's like there's something there for me, and it's like the breadcrumbs back to myself, my trail back to self, and I mean self with a capital S, Rick, a trail back to God, back to
Hmm.
reality of where I've got lost out in the illusion again.
Yeah.
So it was subtle, and the more subtle it's gotten in my life, the more powerful it is. So
Mm.
I'm very much more open now to it. When it comes, it's exciting in some way that there's something left of me, and that's a marker, that's a pointer to say turn here, like go in here and sit and see what's happening.
That's great. I mean, that's a very refreshing. That's one thing. If people only remember one thing from this interview, that might be a good one to remember, which is that anytime you feel like you have a problem, it's an opportunity to see where you've got some kind of shadow work to do within yourself. Some kind of place where you haven't shown the light yet.
Exactly. And Rick, if we understood that all that shadow, I mean, even that terminology, our shadow work, our underworld, if
Uh-huh.
we really understood that that's all just thinking,
Mm.
that it's not the essence of who we are, that it's a thought that caused all that.
Yeah.
Like I'm not good enough, something's wrong with me,
Hmm.
I'm unlovable, life is hard, like fill in the blank, that all that caused all of that was a thought that we haven't questioned. So it's very doable to just have one thought at a time and then write it down and ask the questions and turn it around.
Yeah. I wanted to just revert back to something we were talking about a minute ago. It seems like, from what I read, Byron Katie did have a kind of a sudden, unexpected awakening. She was sitting in a halfway house and a cockroach crawled across her foot, and all of a sudden there was this awakening. And similarly, Eckhart Tolle, sitting, he was like on the verge of suicide practically, and he's just questioned, wait a minute, if I can't live with myself, are there two of me? Who is this I with whom I cannot live? And next morning woke up and it was a whole new situation. But both of them, had several years at least of kind of working through a lot of things and integrating and making sense of it all. I mean, Byron Katie in her way, Eckhart sitting on a park bench feeding the pigeons, just sort of gradually sort of making sense of it all. And I think that is the exception rather than the rule. the norm, that kind of abrupt awakening followed by years of integration. I think most of us are proceeding incrementally, layer after layer, working things out as you've been describing.
And I think so too. And it is the layer after layer now just seems a lot less arduous, a lot less kind of intimidating, because it simply is the only layer there is a thought layer. Thought caused it all. Thought is the cause of it all. So that's not as ominous, that we just see that, oh, if thinking is the cause here, everything else is the effect of that, then we don't have to spend too much more time in the effects. And to the degree that we understand that thinking caused it all, like, what are we going to react to? That all that's ever happening is a thought appearing, thought appearing, thought appearing, thought appearing, then we can't have much reaction to that.
Some people say that the more difficult stuff is the last to go, the deeper, darker stuff, because if it were easier, it would have gone sooner, and that, we kind of, but you're kind of saying that it's getting easier and easier for you. Or maybe it's easier to deal with deeper stuff, because I mean, one man can lift 100 pounds easily, and another can hardly lift 10. But if you're strong enough, then the 100, it's all relative.
Well, it's also meaningless.
How so? What do you mean? In what way? There's no reality. There's no meaning to. All the concepts are made up. So even concepts like deep. Right. Like that's deep. It's like we made that up. We don't know what that is. Yeah. And then we react to a concept like, oh, that's deep. And how do you react when you think that's deep? And it's like, oh my goodness. Oh. And it's like, who would you be if you didn't have a concept of deep? If we understood that that all the meaning that deep has is what I have applied to it. I made it all up. Right. So it's a blank slate. It's a blank field. And I'm projecting on it my own meanings, and then reacting to the meanings that I've projected as though they're reality. So in other words, what I just said was really sort of overcomplicated speculation, and what you're doing is just in a very simple way, just sort of questioning thoughts as they arise, and and seeing how substantial they are, and then they kind of dissolve, and yes, as you question them, it's like, they leave you, they dissolve. Right. And then you believe them less and less. An example I often use that's been meaningful to people, I'm so struck about what really is meaningful to people. Like if I said to you, your hair's green, how does that affect you? Not at all, obviously, because I know it isn't. And unless there's something wrong with your eyes. Yes, you spontaneously laugh, like it was just joy in you, like, oh, like she thinks my hair is green. Yeah. And so we don't believe it, so it doesn't affect us. Right. And then I could say, you're the worst excuse for an interviewer I've ever seen. And if I thought you were serious, I'd probably think, oh my God, Yes. And you just grabbed your heart, our neck tightens. I'd feel like my solar plexus would tingle or something. Yes. So that's an exact measure of how we believe a thought. So and then that's also an indicator that I still believe that, because I had a visceral reaction to that. I had a body reaction to that. My body is a feedback mechanism that tells me I believe that. And then I get busy with, write that down, ask 4 questions, turn it around. And then eventually that can affect me. I could say, you're the worst excuse for an interviewer, and you would just say, I've had that thought also. Yeah. I think that too sometimes. And then it's like, okay, if she wants me to be a better interviewer, I want me to be a better interviewer. It's like, what suggestions do you have for me? Give me some feedback. And read some books on it or something. Watch Larry King. Exactly. So, and to the degree then that we get that it's all just thinking, like we couldn't react to much. We would just see this as a thought appearing. And there's no thought that I can have that you haven't had. There's no new thought in the whole world. So
what would we be afraid of?
Yeah.
Like
Sometimes there's a certain, I'm sorry, go ahead.
the worst I could think about you, you already think about you.
Yeah.
So
So,
we can live fearlessly.
sometimes there's a certain amount of psychic energy though in, in infused in, like if someone is yelling and screaming at you, it's not just the meaning of their words that is impacting you, but there's this sort of like stressful, you know what I mean? I mean, my father was very abusive. He used to drink a lot and yell at my mother all night long, and eventually drove her into a mental hospital. And there was a lot of, it wasn't just the content of what he was saying, it was the sort of the atmosphere that was created, with all that anger and negativity. It's just sort of so how do you deal with that as opposed to just the content where, let's say you didn't just say I was a bad interviewer, you started screaming at me, and there was all this sort of emotional, psychic energy coming through.
Well, it just wouldn't have anything to do with you, Rick.
Mm-hmm.
My screaming is an effect of my own thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you understood that, you couldn't react to that either. And then your mind would be clear, like, I don't like this, and then you could just disconnect.
Yeah,
you could
true.
hang up on me. You could say, well, that didn't turn out quite like I had in mind. She's not suitable for my show. So you'd be empowered to do what felt right for you to do, and you'd understand that all of the effects coming out of me is a result of my own thinking.
Yeah.
Just like if I somehow gave you the look, I just gave you the look somehow. It's like that look on my face is an effect of my own thought. It's nothing to do with you. It could never be anything to do with you. And we're so identified with this, with this ourself, we think, with this thing. We're so identified that we think it's got something to do with us. So then whatever look is on their face, we take it personally, like, oh, that's me that they're looking at. And it's like, no, the look on their face is an effect of the thought that just occurred to them, which could be, you're ugly, you're fat, you're inadequate, you're whatever. So whatever thought hit them, that look on their face is an effect of that, and it has nothing to do with me.
It's easy to get identified. I mean, even going to a movie, and it's a movie, but if it's a really suspenseful movie, you're sitting there and you're chewing your fingers. You say, "Don't open that door," don't go there, don't do this. And I'm sure if they hooked you up to various instruments, your heart would be beating faster, and even though you can think anytime this is only a movie, but we react to things. We get sucked in.
That's exactly it. And so the life is a movie also.
Yeah, exactly.
And we've lost ourselves in it. It's no different. We got the same stimulation in the body that we would be just like it's happening to us, and it's all thought caused. Yeah. So we've forgotten that it's a movie.
And even if we remember, though, even if we know it, we still react. We still get caught in.
Yes.
Like you said, we get blurred over.
Yes, and until we don't, then our thoughts are going to run the show.
Yeah. I know people, especially living here in Fairfield, who have been meditating for 40 years and stuff. And very often it's like there's this analogy that you can move a table by pulling any of its legs, and all the other legs are going to come along. And a lot of times people feel like, well, if I just do this, this going into a state of inner silence, everything else is going to work itself out. But you very often find people who've been doing that for decades who still have a lot of baggage and a lot of stuff that maybe it would be good if they pulled two legs of the table simultaneously, keep doing their meditation if they want, but also look at this, look at that, learn how to change one's thinking, as in the way you've described, might move the table along a lot more easily.
Well, and that was my experience, and I consider the work a meditation, and I used to sit in meditation and had mantra and that, and would consider it peaceful, and it was gentle, and I felt renewed by it. And the minute, even before my eyes was open, the infinite mind was recreating itself. So even in the meditation, there was a little peace sometimes, because it would be a thought like, I need a pillow, or oh, somebody should be here meditating with me, or how long's it been, or is
Yeah.
this really going to work, or, and it's like, so instead of, I found something through questioning the mind that was meditative and that had a result that was mind blowing to me, and that is effective and sustainable
Hmm.
and and accessible. It doesn't require anything except to to ask the question and then to answer it if you really want to get to the other side.
You mentioned,
The
when
truth.
when you started in on this, you felt like you were moving rather quickly, 51%, 61%, 81%, like that. Do you feel now, um, that to a great extent, universal awareness or pure awareness or vastness or whatever terminology we want to use has become quite very much part of your living reality as a result of all this?
I do. I don't know what percentage, and I don't believe that just because I'm experiencing it right now that it's going to last. I mean,
Right.
I cannot know the future. I don't know that somebody won't knock on the door here in a minute, and stick a gun in my rib cage.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know how I would react to that. I just know that ever how I react to that would be based on the thought that I was having at the time. So it's got nothing to do with the gun or the person. It's to do with the thought that I'm having,
Hmm.
and that is that's solid ground for me.
Yeah,
So
as you speak, somehow the metaphor comes to mind of a musician tuning their instrument before playing. It's almost like this whole process you've been describing is a way of kind of tuning oneself, so that when we play, it doesn't sound bad. Sounds like it's
yeah,
supposed to sound.
that's the way I see it too, Rick. And then when the mind takes over again, or I'll lose myself again, then I'm not is it I'm out of tune. And if I can hear myself, then I'm going to restore my
Retune.
tuning. I'm going to attune, and atone before I proceed very much. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to play in a band. I was a drummer, and very often between songs, the guitar players would have to just tune up a little bit again because it had gotten off slightly.
Yes.
You know,
And we're going to get off with just one thought that goes unquestioned.
yeah.
It really is that simple. It's not as easy as it sounds sometimes. But it's like there's really just two paths. Thought appears, and then you either believe it and suffer, or you question it and don't.
Mm,
So, and I call it peace or pain, and I also call it go within or go without.
yeah,
So it's which is it going to be? Which is it going to be?
that's great. So, um, having heard all this, if a person thinks, well, this sounds like an interesting approach, I could get into this, what should they do?
www.thework.com.
Okay,
TheWork.com.
okay.
Free resources, free audio streams, video streams, all the books, excerpts from the book, a page of certified facilitators, a helpline where people serve for free to facilitate people through the work.
Hmm.
And then the books, Loving What Is, Thousand Names for Joy, I Need Your Love, Is That True? It's got
Hmm.
great exercises in it, and the practices are laid out there. And if they want to work with me directly, they can contact me at marthacreek.net. And I work on a love offering basis. That means they pay whatever they want to pay, and I
Hmm.
facilitate them based on appointments. So it's available, 100% available to anybody who wants it, free.
That's great. Um, well, I always feel when I do these interviews, and this one in particular, that I'm enjoying this so much I could go on all night thinking up questions and talking because it's so nice. But I think we've covered it pretty well. Is there anything you feel like we haven't covered that you'd like to throw in there before we conclude?
I'm especially grateful for you, to you, and for whatever is motivating you to do this. Um, I'm especially grateful for that. And I'm privileged to sit with you. And I delight at the pebble in the pond here and where the waves may go. And no
Mm.
different than how we met in the first place. I mean, the rare chance that I would be in Fairfield, Iowa. And there I am, there you are, and here we
Hmm.
are today. And
Yeah.
what we're giving here is meaningful, and I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Martha. what motivates me is just the joy of it. I mean, I just enjoy this so much, and not only, I mean, even if it were just you and I talking and no one was ever going to hear it, I really enjoy this. And I really enjoy tuning into a different person each week, and there's so many lovely people out there. But I also enjoy, when other people are inspired by it and benefit from it, and each person I speak to has a different, slightly different way of presenting themselves, and I'll do an interview like this, and I'll get feedback from one person saying, you shouldn't have interviewed that person, they were lousy, and then 10 minutes later an email will come in saying, oh, that was just what I needed to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like to mix it up, and I think yours has been a very beautiful contribution.
Thank you for that. It was interesting to have questions about my story, about my life and my childhood, and it was fun today to tell it, and to not diminish it in some way, like that's a story, that's a story, that's a story, to just answer the question. And it's also very humbling, and I have a great deal of gratitude that even as I was telling that story, that I didn't believe for a second that it's who I am.
Right.
So,
Right.
that's how we know. That's how we can test how much of this has taken hold of us. Like if we
Yeah.
can answer the questions and tell the story with still some investment in somebody getting it, hearing it, versus, it's so irrelevant, really.
Yeah. Great. Well, you have an interesting story. Story, even though it's a story, and people like stories,
Yeah.
and I think they're illustrative. They're edifying. And a lot of people can, they can relate to different facets of different people's stories and say, well, I can relate to that, and so maybe there's hope for me.
Yes, and I get a lot of feedback about that. So I'm dedicated to telling it for that reason. That
Yeah.
it's beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually the little subtitle of this whole program is, and the title of it, Buddha at the Gas Pump. The implication being that very awakened people in ordinary circumstances, and the subtitle is interviews with ordinary spiritually awakened people. And of course, I guess ultimately everyone's ordinary, but we tend to kind of put people on pedestals and feel like whatever they've got is unattainable, and I couldn't possibly be like Eckhart Tolle or Byron Katie or somebody. But the fact is, we're all bozos on this bus, and
Yes,
we can.
and we're one thought away from it.
Yeah, beautiful.
One thought unquestioned. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, we're carrying on a little bit, and we were about to conclude, but we're some more good stuff here, which is that many people feel like, oh, it's just not going to happen to me in this lifetime. It's so far away, maybe decades from now, maybe on my deathbed or something, I can have this kind of liberation or insight. But that one thought away phrase is very, I think, encouraging for people.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks, Martha. So let me just make a couple of concluding statements here that I always make, which is that depending on how you found this interview, there's one place to go if you want to sort of find all of them. There's batgap.com, which is an acronym for Buddha at the Gas Pump, so that's batgap.com. Go there and you'll see all the ones that I've been doing and will do, and you can sign up to get an email if you like, to be notified every time a new one is put up. It's also available in podcast form if you don't want to sit in front of your computer and any more than you already do. You can get this on your iPod or your MP3 player and listen while you're walking the dog or whatever. And there's a little donate button there, which if you feel the impulse to click it, go ahead, don't resist. I just had to shell out a bunch of money to buy some more equipment for my dear friend Ralph Preston, whom I really should mention at the end of every single one of these interviews. We were buddies in high school and haven't seen him since, but we've been working together on this project, and he does all the post-production work and spends more time than I do probably, getting all this in usable form. So and there's a link to his website on my website, which you can check out. He had a stroke several years ago, and it made a remarkable recovery, and is doing stuff to help other people who have had strokes. So wonderful guy. So in any case, that's what I want to say in conclusion. I thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.